Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding. We, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the king, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Call of the roll. This honorable House now resumes its sitting. Call of the roll.
Mrs. Holness, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malawi Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Miss Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Miss Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright.
This evening, it gives me great pleasure, and it is indeed my honor as a speaker to welcome everyone to another sitting of the House of Representatives today as we continue the budget debate today, the 9th of March, 2023. I want to welcome specially invited guests of the speaker this afternoon, and I want to say a special welcome to all those joining us online by the various social media platforms. And members, I ask you to indulge me today as I say also a very special welcome this afternoon to the Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes, Member of Parliament and the Speaker of the Cayman Islands House of Parliament. And she is this evening accompanied by Reverend Sylvia Wilkes. I paused this afternoon, yesterday was International Women's Day, to say that Speaker Ebanks is the youngest speaker to be elected as Speaker to the Parliament in Cayman. And of course, she's female, and so we salute her especially. She has over 13 years of experience in the legal profession, first working in financial services paralegal in the private sector, and more recently in research in paralegal in the Cayman Islands Law Reform Commission. She is deeply passionate about her community and is a founding director of United Against Bullying Foundation, a non-profit organization in Cayman that focuses on the prevention and the education as it relates to bullying. So we welcome you heartily, and we know you will have a good evening with us as we continue the budget debate for 2023, the year. House Leader. Statements by ministers, announcements,
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: Annual Report on Audited Financial Statement for the Human Employment and Resource Training National Service Training Agency Trust for the financial year 2012 to 2022. Annual Report for the Bath Foundation Hotel for the financial year 2019 to 2020. Annual Report of the Tourism Enhancement Fund for the financial year 2021-2022, and Annual Report for the Devon House Development Limited for the financial year 2021-2022. An amendment to the first report, Annual Report on Audited Financial Statement for the Human Employment and Resource Training National Service Training Agency Trust for the financial year 2021-2022.
Bills brought from the Senate. Bills brought from the Senate. Madam Clerk? Yes.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate. Please hold.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, Notices of motions given orally. House Leader. Notices of motions given orally. Ms. Curtis, Madam Clerk.
Madam Speaker, it is my pleasure, Madam Speaker. Question.
Don't you have a question or something?
Yes, yes. You want to open?
No, sir. He'll okay if I talk. It's only this amount of time?
So them say, normally. Madam Speaker, I ask if you could proceed to public business, and I'll ask for a recommittal. Thank you.
Questions and answers to questions.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the expiration of 7 clear days, I will ask the Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce the following questions standing in my name.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is now my pleasure to ask you to invite Mr. Julian Robinson, MP, Opposition Spokesperson on Finance, and MP for Southeastern St. Andrew, to make his presentation as we continue the debate.
I now invite the Member of Parliament from Southeastern St. Andrew to make his contribution to the budget debate.
I will give you an opportunity to say that many times. Madam Speaker, I rise to bring the opposition's response to the 2023 estimates of expenditure. But first, I'd like to briefly recognize those to whom I owe gratitude. I give thanks to the Almighty for blessing me with health and strength to make another presentation in this House. I'm grateful to my family, my wife, Mariam, who is here. She's here for the first time, and I assured her, particularly my church brother from Western St. Mary, that you would be on best behavior today, as always. Madam Speaker, I want to thank my children, PJ and Amara, for their love and support. And to my father, who isn't here, but who has been a constant source of support for me throughout my entire life. My siblings, my brother, my sister, Graham and Tracy, and my entire family has always been there for me. I come in, you're preempting me. You're preempting me. My aunt Heather, who the member from North Central St. Andrew, has always been and continues to be a source of tremendous support, wisdom, and guidance. Why are you preempting me? Okay. Madam Speaker, my political family from Southeast St. Andrew is here. Councillor Swaby, Councillor Candidate Jesse James Clark, our constituency secretary, Ivy Hill, Sonia Forbes, the entire constituency leadership team. I thank them. Madam Speaker, when the tide was against us nationally, Southeast St. Andrew stood strong and was firmly there behind me. Madam Speaker, I thank my CPO Gavin, my driver Joe, for their continued support. I have chosen to serve this country through the vehicle of the People's National Party. And there is not a day that I regret that choice. And I want to thank our party leader and opposition leader, Mark Golding, my colleagues who are here in the House, my comrades who are here in the gallery, and those who are watching and listening. I thank them for their continued support. And finally, but perhaps most importantly, I serve here at the pleasure of the residents of Southeast St. Andrew. And I'm keenly aware of the great privilege it is to be here to represent their interests. And whether they voted for me or not, I will continue to serve them and to do so with dignity and integrity. Madam Speaker, on Tuesday, the Minister of Finance presented to the Parliament a historic $1 trillion budget, generating expectations from the wider Jamaican public that there would be something in it for them, something that would ease the struggles that many Jamaicans are facing on a day-to-day basis. What is their reality? Their reality is a runaway murder rate. Their reality is massive corruption, theft, and misuse of public resources. Their reality is a worrying number of students who leave school illiterate and innumerate. Their reality is a spiraling cost of living. And their reality is the struggle of Jamaicans every day to earn a livable wage. Madam Speaker, the budget presented does not address in a meaningful way the fundamental issues that are affecting the Jamaican people. We acknowledge that some of the initiatives announced by the Minister on Tuesday are a step in the right direction. And we acknowledge that. And if there are things that we believe are in the country's interest, we're going to say so. So we acknowledge that. And many of those, quite frankly, some of them are things which were proposed by members on this side. And so we support things that move the country forward. But Madam Speaker, what does the budget mean for the estimated 50% of households who are headed by women? How does the spending cater to them? What does it mean for those who make up our economy? For the people who get up and have to hustle every day? The people who sell food that they may have grown, or those that they purchase from our farmers? Is the budget catering to them? We have people walking the streets and sitting at a stall, selling to send their children to school. What is in the budget for them? We have people, even in the middle class, who, if someone in their family falls ill, the whole family falls into poverty. What is in the budget for them? We have salaried workers who are basically working poor because they simply cannot make ends meet. What is in the budget for them? Madam Speaker, when a government decides to spend taxpayers' money, it must listen to the people. I can't say I'm convinced that what we heard from the Finance Minister considers these questions, or whether he is listening to the people. At the very least, there should have been a provision in the budget for local government elections. If we call ourselves a democracy, we must enthusiastically take every opportunity for the people to be heard. Elections are consultations. Elections are opportunities for people to participate in governance. Elections give the people a voice. Yet, Madam Speaker, this government has not seen it fit to hold them in the constitutionally determined time. Madam Speaker, if things are going as well as the government says, then how is it that in a $1 trillion budget, $1 trillion, that the government could not find just over $1 billion to hold an election? Is it that the government knows in their hearts that the budget presented with the theatrics, with the banging of the desk, simply does not address the basic needs of the Jamaican people? Why is the government afraid to face the people? Madam Speaker, today I'm speaking to the many Jamaicans who feel detached because they think the government does not consult with them or budget in their interests. I am listening, I have listened, and will continue to listen. The message that I'm hearing from the Jamaican people, Madam Speaker, over and over, is that we can't continue so. We simply can't continue so. Madam Speaker, in the Jamaican context, the distinction between the working poor and poverty is a porous one. It has been estimated that 11%, and the figures vary, live below the poverty line, and that unemployment is at 6%, which is close to a record low. But the question we have to ask is, what kind of jobs are people working in? What are the conditions of work? Among the phrases we hear from the Jamaican workers is that they live in hand to mouth, them living paycheck to paycheck, which underscores the challenge of making ends meet on the salaries that they earn in this economy. The acute disparity between the cost of living and salary levels in Jamaica has resulted in a large number of our workers being classified as working poor. The phenomenon of the working poor also extends to Jamaicans working in the informal economy, who face constant uncertainty, irregularity, and fluctuation, both in their earnings and the conditions of work. It is no secret that Jamaicans are paid comparatively lower wages for doing similar jobs when you compare that to our counterparts in the Caribbean and Latin America. A survey conducted by IDB in 2017 ranked Jamaica with then a monthly minimum wage of US $380 per month as the third cheapest source of labor among 20 Caribbean and Latin American countries, measured by wage and non-wage costs. Only Mexico at $253, Bolivia at $371, and the Dominican Republic at $341 have averaged lower wages than workers in Jamaica. Madam Speaker, all this confirms is that one key characteristic of the Jamaican economy is that we are a low-wage economy. This means that we are slotted within an international division of labor as an economy in which major innovation rarely occurs, and one in which extraction is one of the key ways to attract foreign capital. Here, the key feature of extraction is not just in our mining services, but rather how the economy is structured so that the ratio of capital which leaves the country and accrues to capital abroad is very high. That's one of the features of our low-wage economy. Madam Speaker, in calculating living costs helps communities and policymakers better understand how much families must earn to maintain self-sufficiency and a minimum standard of living. The calculation of a living or livable wage thus provides a realistic methodological framework that is consistent with the economic realities of our country. According to a study done by UTech professor Fitzroy Henry, in November 2020, which is about 2.5 years ago. It costs $3.29, or approximately Jamaican 490 Jamaican dollars a day to meet a low-cost, nutritionally balanced diet for a single person. For a single person per day. This was done in 2020, 2.5 years ago. Statin has reported that food cost inflation since then, over the 2-year period, has averaged over 22%. This would put the average cost of a low-cost, nutritionally balanced diet for one person at roughly 600 Jamaican dollars a day, or 4,200 Jamaican dollars a week, as of January 2023. That 4,200 Jamaican dollars a week represents right now 46% of what the national minimum wage is, at $9,000. So I just want to repeat what I said. For one low-cost nutritional meal per day, it will cost an individual $4,200 for the week, which works out to $600 a day. One person. And so we haven't considered the family yet. That is 46% of the current minimum wage. So, Madam Speaker, when we look at the constant raising of prices, you can see how difficult it is for people to survive and to feed themselves on a day-to-day basis. Starting with weights, food, and non-alcoholic beverages at 35% of the total basket of goods and services used to measure the movement in the Consumer Price Index. That roughly tells us how much our money can afford. But we already know that there are many, many, many Jamaicans who simply cannot afford the mix of goods that Statin uses. And when we look only at a small number of basic food items, the things that many of us consume, we can only imagine how difficult it is for people to survive on a day-to-day basis. And I want to share, Madam Speaker, some of the costs of food items. If we take chicken, well, let me start with chicken back. Has moved from $391 per kilogram to $437 in a 1-year period. Chicken and prices vary, and this comes from the Consumer Affairs Commission based on their island-wide survey. Chicken has moved from $700 per kilogram to $818, 17% increase. Cooking oil, $324 for the 500 milliliter to $385, a 19% increase. Counter flour, from $130 to $173, a 33% increase, all in the last year. And if we look at some of the other items, sugar has gone up 20%, $263 to $316. Cornmeal, 25%. Mackerel, 13%. Milk powder, 21%. Rice, 7%. And these are the average prices. These are the average prices that consumers are facing on an everyday basis. And Madam Speaker, while these prices may seem like a marginal increase to some, what it means for those who are at the base of our society, it means that the cup of tea, or the saltfish fritters, or the cup of cornmeal porridge, all of those things have gone up. Every single one of them have gone up. So it means what you would normally be able to consume for breakfast in the morning, you probably can't consume it anymore. And you have to forego a meal, 1 meal per day, because of the cost of food items. This is the reality, Madam Speaker, that Jamaicans are faced with every single day. Madam Speaker, based on these numbers, if even the lowest paid worker in our society is to enjoy the mix of goods that statin uses to determine inflation, they would need to be paid $11,730 a week. So if you look at food, it represents 35% of the basket. Basic food items would account for $4,200 per week. For somebody to consume that, and remember, you are assuming the person has other costs. They have transportation costs, they have utilities costs, they will have costs to send their children to school. I don't even reach medicine yet. But I'm saying they can't get sick because they won't be able to afford it. So, Madam Speaker, if you take the 4,200, somebody would need to earn a minimum of $11,700 a week simply to be able to have that one nutritious meal a day for the week. For one person. And there are very few families with one person. The majority of families are single, female-headed, who have to support children and send children to school. So when we bear in mind that our women are overrepresented in the low-wage labor sector in the country. In fact, a recent Capri study told us that women, on average, earn only 61% of the income of men. So how does this match with their reality when there are so many households headed by women? Madam Speaker, if the minimum wage is indecent, it means that we are fueling poverty. The finance minister announced an increase in the minimum wage, but didn't announce a figure. And he has indicated that the Minister of Labour will come in March to tell us what that figure is. In April, sorry. And we hope that this figure will be something which our minimum wage earners can live with. The minimum wage sets the standard for wages across the board. It means our tourism workers, our construction, household helpers, security guards, all are impacted. And, Madam Speaker, it's important to note, it's not just the minimum wage earners who are struggling. There are many salaried workers, people who are paid on a monthly basis, who are struggling on a day-to-day basis to meet their expenses. Madam Speaker, last year I called on the government to move away from a minimum wage and to instead look at implementing a mechanism to determine what I would consider a livable wage. A livable wage. I again propose that a determination of the livable wage be rooted in analysis of our annual price movements, the inflation rate, and a determination of the basket of goods and services consumed by our lowest earners. This analysis should be done periodically to protect the most vulnerable against the ravages of inflation, and it should include consultations with workers, economists, and other social scientists. Madam Speaker, I am not here to indicate what that number is. Last year I proposed 12,000, but I'm not indicating a number because all of us in here, if we ask, may have different figures. I might say it should be 15. Horace might say it should be 13. Carl might say it should be 18. But what we want is a mechanism that objectively determines that. And I hope when the minister comes next month, he will tell us what the figure is, but tell us the process so that going forward, whether it be annually or every 2 years, minimum wage earners know that they are protected against the ravages of inflation and they can protect the standard of living that they have. But, Madam Speaker, I have a concern and I have to raise this with the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Labour announced an increase last year from 7,000 to 9,000. There are still government agencies and departments that have not adjusted from the 7,000 to the 9,000. So you have service providers, for example, who have contracts, whether they be the janitors or others, working in government agencies, but there has been no adjustment provided. So government has to lead by example. Government has to ensure. And Minister, I can give you the names of some of the companies offline, who is a lot of them. And they say, when they ask the questions, why the new minimum wage is not earned, they are told that there's a cabinet decision that they are awaiting. I can give you specific information off the air. But we have to deal with that issue. Because what it means is we have employees working still at the old minimum wage, almost 1 year later. And below the legally established minimum wage prescribed. So while we move come next month to a new minimum wage, we have to make sure we correct what we did from last year and ensure when the adjustment is made that at least the government agencies are dealing with it. Because we can't hold private sector people to account.
You can't outsource people to poverty.
Right. As the leader said, you can't outsource people to poverty. But the government must lead that process and must set the example. Madam Speaker, a low-wage economy coupled with the cost of living crisis means that many Jamaicans are desperate. How desperate are they? Right now, we have record numbers of Jamaicans who are risking their lives by traveling to Central America and trying to cross the border into the U.S. through Mexico. It has now become the new route for many Jamaicans. The numbers have increased so rapidly and significantly that in May, we were told that the Mexican government had toughened the immigration processes in permitting landing for Jamaicans amid growing concerns over an illegal human smuggling corridor to the U.S. The Mexicans were concerned about a 68% jump in Jamaicans traveling to Mexico between 2020 and 2021, moving from 4,467 to 7,509. Jamaicans, Madam Speaker, are desperate enough to risk their lives to get to somewhere else. But who we might deem desperate are not the only ones who are leaving our shores. We have our professionals, our teachers, our nurses, who are being legitimately recruited to leave, and many of them have. I'll give you an example, and this is not a pox on anybody's house, but I just tell you the reality of what we face. I still chair a basic school in my constituency. I was chairman before I became MP, and I have remained. And the principal of the basic school indicated to me that she had gotten an opportunity to go away to teach in the US. And I provided a recommendation for her. And in my discussions, I asked her, what is the salary you're going to get? Because she was going to go teach grade 1 students in New York. Her monthly salary was $7,000 a month. Of course, it's more than all of us earn. But I'm just indicating this is what our teachers are being lured to. And what I realize, Madam Speaker, they are recruiting the most experienced ones. As a principal of a basic school, she has 20-odd years experience. She has a master's degree. Those are the teachers that are being recruited for a grade 1 teacher in New York. No, I'm not saying anybody can match those salaries. I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm simply making the point about what our teachers face and the attractiveness of the remuneration that they can go to without the kinds of conditions that they have to work with here. I really hope you didn't say that.
She did say.
I really hope you didn't say that.
Yeah.
Madam Speaker, I want to shift.
But turn around and tell her that.
Madam Speaker, I want to shift to the public sector compensation review. Democratic politics said that you can't treat our workers with disrespect, and you can't bully them into an agreement. You can't treat them with disrespect, and you can't bully them into an agreement. The Minister of Finance, by his own admission, has said this is the largest and the most complex restructuring of salaries and compensation the public sector has ever had. This restructuring will affect people's careers, their lives, and their livelihoods. On Tuesday, the minister quoted a proverb, an African proverb. He said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Go together. Go together. Madam Speaker, it seems that when it comes to the public sector compensation review, the minister wants to go it alone because his approach has left many public sector workers behind. Many public sector workers behind. Madam Speaker, if you're planning for monumental change involving people, you need to take the time to make the changes and the tweaks to get it right. You have to take the time. While many of the approximately 113,000 public sector workers have signed on, there are over 40,000 who have not signed on. And many of these groups are significant in the operations of our country. There are 14,000 members of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, which include your rank and file members, to district constables, and the senior officers from inspectors right up. 14,000 haven't signed. All categories of teachers, which account for 26,000, have not signed. Educational officers have not signed. Correctional service officers, 3,000 of them, the people who man our prisons, they have not signed. Medical consultants, as well as junior doctors, they have not signed. Legal officers have not signed. Probational officers have not signed. The Fire Brigade has not signed. Irrigation Commission, NWA, NHT, the Met Office. So we have, at this point, 40,000 of the 113 who are yet to sign. Madam Speaker, our public sector workers are complaining that they are being pressured to meet a March 31 deadline. Yes. They feel pressure. Yes. They feel pressure that if they don't sign by March 31st, then they won't get their benefits. Madam Speaker, if you treat the workers this way, you're going to get a reaction where people's backs going to get up. And they're going to stand up to you. And I tell you, Madam Speaker, no, don't go there. Please, beg you, don't go there. Don't go there. Don't go there.
Don't spread the big lie.
Don't go there.
Don't spread the big lie.
Don't go there. Don't go there. Madam Speaker, the changes, Madam Speaker, the changes that are being proposed are significant. And for these public servants, what happens now will affect their careers and their earnings for years to come. Absolutely. Many of the complaints we are getting, Madam Speaker, from the outstanding groups are not just about issues of what they are going to be paid. That's correct. It is not just what they are going to be paid. There are issues of equity, there are issues of fairness, and there are issues about the basis on which they have been reclassified. Absolutely. Now, Madam Speaker, these are genuine concerns. Now, I know the minister started this process some time ago, but this process, because of the complexity, there have been issues between unions and who they represent, where many of the workers are only...
The member's time for speaking has expired.
Sufficient.
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the standing orders be suspended to enable the member to continue his speech to its conclusion.
Members, the question before the House is that the standing orders is suspended to allow the Speaker to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Member?
Eh? Oh, well, I'm not going to be here all night. Madam Speaker, it is important that the legitimate issues that have been raised by these workers are treated in a way where there are thorough explanations, where there is effective consultation, where there is respectful communication, and where there is humility in listening to the concerns of the workers and helping them to understand the changes. Absolutely. I will tell you, even though you may have spoken to unions, I am telling you, I don't think every single union necessarily understood and necessarily was in a position to explain some of these changes properly to the workers. So you have workers now who are only finding out effectively what these changes mean to them. Many of them, they weren't aware. They're only finding out now. And they feel, Minister, that they are being pressured to meet this March 31 deadline. And they feel that if you bully them, they are going to stand up. They are going to say it's not fair. They are going to say, take the time and explain what these changes mean to me. So the issues are not solely around money. Yes, there are people who want more money, absolutely. But people want to be treated with a certain level of respect in how the process works. We are ready. We are ready to help.
One speaker on the floor just now.
Madam Speaker, on the issue of this March 31st deadline, on the issue of the March 31st deadline, it is our view that the minister can set aside funds using a contingency provision for the fiscal year 23-24 to include the amounts budgeted for the public sector workers in relation to the compensation review. And that once he has reached agreement with the unions, then those sums can be paid. So we are saying a contingency for the 23-24 year can be established for these funds. And as such, Madam Speaker, we don't believe workers should be pushed, we don't believe they should be bullied, and we don't believe they should be pressured to come to an agreement by March 31st when there are legitimate concerns that they have. So we are saying to those workers who are fighting for their rights, ask the questions that you have, seek the answers. Minister or public servants want to go far, but they don't want to go fast. And the only way we can go is if we all go there together. And I believe we can get there together. We can get there together. The teachers have worked tirelessly, and they are the ones responsible for the future of Jamaica. Every one of us who sits in this house can give examples of the profound impact that teachers have had on our lives. Profound to the point where it has probably changed our own lives. His mother, my mother was one. Many of us have family who are teachers. But when we get to negotiating with the teachers, let us do so with respect, let us do so with humility, and let us do so with an understanding that the concerns that they are raising are genuine ones. Madam Speaker, I want to turn my attention to an issue which has played out in the public domain around what I would call the perception of labor shortages. As people are leaving our shores, as we have a very low unemployment rate, there are a number of members of the private sector who have raised concerns about their inability to find workers for vacancies that exist in their operations. And there has been a suggestion that as a country, we need to import labor. I know that view has been posited, and I know people are actively pursuing it. But Madam Speaker, before we even contemplate or move ahead with importing labor, we need to do a proper analysis of what is happening in our labor force. We need to understand why are there so many people outside the formal labor force. We need to understand, are the wages that are being offered to persons too low? Or have people made a decision that they're not going to work for certain wages? You know, I ask the question because we have record low unemployment rate, 6.2%. It was 6%, now it's 6.2%. But if you have any job fear, you will see hundreds and thousands of Jamaicans who come from all over the country, who line up from 4 o'clock in the morning to try to get onto one of these job fairs. Many of them are scams. 2 weeks ago, Carl, there was one at Girl Guides on Waterloo Road. And it hurts me when I see people exploit a genuine desire that people have for work. Every single one of us in here, if you ask us, what is the #1 request we get inside here? Farm work ticket. Farm work ticket. So, Madam Speaker, we need to understand why is it in an environment of record low levels of unemployment that we have so many Jamaicans, and all of us have examples in our constituency, where we know many people who are unemployed, we know people who are looking for work, and we know many people who have opted out of the workforce. I am just urging caution, and I'm urging to the government. I know there is a strong lobby to import workers. Don't make we do it. Don't make we do it. Let us first do the analysis. Let us do the analysis first. And you know what I said? I'm going to come back to the discussion we had at Standing Finance here about the census workers. And there was a view posited that the main reason we had problems with recruiting census workers is because of the tightness in the labor market. It don't go so. It don't go so, Minister. There are a number of issues about how the process has been managed, from people who have been called and recruited but not followed up, from people who are qualified and who say them have an interest and nobody don't call them. And I'm just saying it is important that we do the analysis before we make any decision on how we treat with the labor force. And Madam Speaker, we also have to question, what is the role of HEART in ensuring that we train and certify workers to meet the requirements of industry? What role is HEART playing? Madam Speaker, I must tell you, it is with profound disappointment that I again raise concerns about HEART. And I must tell you, Desmond, your mentor and former member of parliament, would be shamed. Would be shamed at what HEART is right now. HEART has become so inwardly focused. The issues that HEART deal with are all inward. They are not able to train people to meet the needs of industry. There's a businessman the other day who said he needed 14 carpenters. Not the normal carpenter, some more high-end. Went to HEART and couldn't get one. Not one. Not one. Madam Speaker.
You need to be more transformational.
Madam Speaker, the HEART falls under the portfolio of the Prime Minister. It is the Prime Minister. And I will tell you, a Prime Minister can't deal with every single agency. But this one is a strategic one. This one is a strategic one. And this one requires a particular focus so it can deliver. Because growth is being held up, because people can't find workers to expand and grow their businesses, while at the same time, every one of us know of people in our constituencies who are looking for work. Something wrong. There is simply a mismatch, and we have to address that mismatch. And that is the role of government. Madam Speaker, I want to turn to looking at how we protect the most vulnerable in our society. We must address the conditions of the worst off. The government has budgeted $16.1 billion for PATH for the fiscal year 23-24. Approximately 55% of that amount is earmarked for what is called the conditional cash transfer, while the remaining 45 goes to the breakfast and cook lunch program at schools. While the number may sound impressive to some, Madam Speaker, the truth is that PATH funds have not kept pace with inflation. If we achieve the 5% inflation target that BOJ has for the next fiscal year, $1.40 that would have been spent in this year would be able to buy what $1 could afford in 2017, 2018. So $1.40 today would only be able to buy $1 5 to 6 years ago. So it means, Madam Speaker, that the budgeted amounts for PATH are really woefully inadequate. So let's look at the conditional cash transfer. That is the money then is that people, them send to people. It's a fancy term, but it's the money that people get. The $8.37 billion targets 275,000 people. That works out to be an average of $30,000 per year. So 8.37 billion divided by 275,000. 30,000 people a year. No, I'm going to divide it by 52 to tell you what it works out per week. So when you divide the 300,000 per week, this works out to 30,000 per year to what it constitutes per week. You get $580 per week. Per week. $580 per week. That constitutes the conditional cash transfer. Now remember, I said before, you need about $600 a day per person to have a low-cost meal. 600 a day. What PATH provides on average per week can pay for 1 day and 1 meal. $580. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I don't think anybody needs to debate how woefully inadequate that is. $580 a week that is provided under PATH. And if you look at that as a percentage of GDP, it represents 0.55 of 1% of GDP. 0.55 of 1% of GDP. The 16.3 billion. And that is projected to fall to 0.49%, 0.49 of 1% of GDP by the year 26-27. So, Madam Speaker, what we are allocating for those who are most vulnerable, in spite of, I know there's been an increase provided to students, it is still woefully inadequate. Woefully. But, Madam Speaker, beyond the issue of the reduction and the low levels of spending, there are some administrative issues that have to be addressed with PATH. And I think every one of us in this House has similar experiences. We have constituents who are in need, who we know are in need, who we recommend to PATH to get on the PATH program. And I can tell you, Madam Speaker, it is probably the most frustrating experience trying to get somebody onto the PATH experience, onto PATH. Right? And very often the complaints, yeah man, you can clap. You can clap, it's real. It's real. Very often when the social workers or the assessors go to the house, they might see a flat screen TV. They don't know where the TV come from. Or a fridge or a 2-burner stove. And then they tell the people, they don't tell you. You don't hear nothing, right? And then more likely than not, the constituent will call us as MP and say, what happened? Me apply, I don't hear nothing. The reality, Madam Speaker, it is too hard. I can tell you, even when in cases where I personally follow, we still can't get these people on PATH. Still can't get the people on top.
And the ones on the right?
Madam Speaker, you know, you're the member from West Kingston.
Yes. He's the chirper in chief.
Madam Speaker, in addition to the difficulties with getting people on path, there are also concerns, Minister of Education, about how path students in schools are being treated. Many of them feel that they are being embarrassed or they are being shamed when they have to participate in the path program. And as a result, Madam Speaker, many of them in need opt not to be on the program because they don't want to feel shame that people say it is being administered, whether it is at the schools, the administrators, or the people who run the canteens. But I'm telling you, the students are saying, I'm not going to take the lunch. Because if I take the lunch, people are going to say, me's are this and me's are that. Madam Speaker, we have to find a way to fix this problem. Because the students are in need and they are not getting the help because they feel shame and embarrassed to take the help. We have to fix the problem. Madam Speaker, I want to now turn and look at an issue which impacts the lives of many. An issue which can move the needle on the quality of life and the productivity of many Jamaicans. And that is the provision of a reliable, efficient public transportation system. The basket of goods and services that Statin uses to measure the movement in the consumer price index weights transportation at 11.2% of total consumption, which means that by itself, transportation stands as the second largest component of the consumption basket. In Jamaica, people are faced with a crumbling public transportation system. A crumbling one. Crumbling. And Minister, I tell you the truth. I know you brought the bus here on Tuesday, but I better you send the bus to Parade, or Halfway Tree, or Crossroads, because the people ever stand up 2 hours and can't get the bus. It is a reality. I know we're laughing, but it's a real thing. It's a real thing, Madam Speaker. People have to wait 2 hours, 3 hours to get a bus to go to work. That is where we are at. That is where we are at. Madam Speaker, when we look at the JUTC, it is still more affordable than other modes of transportation. But Madam Speaker, the government has de-invested in the JUTC. De-invested in the JUTC and has made it unattractive and unviable. And I'm going to give you some numbers. I'm going to give you numbers. Over the 4-year period, from 2015-16 to 2019-20, the number of passengers carried by the JUTC fell by 1/3, from 61 million to 41 million. This is before COVID. Before COVID. From 61 million to 41 million. But, Madam Speaker, at the same time, according to Statin, the Transport Authority increased the number of licenses issued to contract carriage, hackney carriage, and route taxis from 17,465 in 2016 to 34,550 in 2019.
Doubled it.
They basically doubled it. So let me repeat. JUTC fell, the passengers, from 61 million to 41 million, but we doubled the amount of licenses issued to taxis. The 96% increase in the issuing of licenses represented a 400 million increase to the government coffers, which came into the government coffers. But the JUTC saw a fall in their revenues of $1.6 billion over that time. So we have JUTC falling, but we are providing more licenses for private taxis to operate on the road at the same time, which also cannibalizes the revenues of the JUTC. Madam Speaker, those policies have led the JUTC to where it is right now. And we need to understand the impact of it. If we want a society where children and students can get to school and work, and workers can get to work on time in a way where they don't feel threatened, they don't feel in any way dehumanized, they don't feel like they have to pack up in the taxi that comes. We have to ensure that we make the JUTC works. We have to ensure. And Madam Speaker, when the JUTC loses, all of us lose because it's funded by taxpayers. The subsidy from the government has to be larger, which means there's less money to do other things. And when you have more taxis on the road, it means that the taximan have to hustle harder because I compete with more people. So you contribute to the indiscipline on the road by the number of licenses that are provided, while the JUTC's fleet has not been replenished and has run down. So I acknowledge, you said on Tuesday you're going to provide 200 new buses over a 3-year period. And I know there is 70 in the works starting soon. But Madam Speaker, I'm going to tell you that alone can't solve the problems at the JUTC. There also has to be a real look at the management of the JUTC. And I'm going to be frank with you.
The hiring practices.
All right? Management has to be looked at. But I tell you, in many of the cases, without the resources, the management can't do nothing. May I tell you the truth? Without the resources, they can't do nothing. When they don't have money to buy spare parts, I tell you, my experience with the older JUTC bus, them, the long one, them, whenever you drive past them, you hear clink, 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 clink. Because they can't be maintained. They don't have the resources to maintain it. So while you may have a management issue, without appropriate resources, we have not been able to keep the fleet at even the most basic levels. Madam Speaker, if we want to reduce the cost of living, if we want to make a more publicly efficient transportation system, there are significant changes that are required at the JUTC, in addition to the acquisition of the buses that you have outlined. Madam Speaker, when you look at the numbers that are being proposed right now, the JUTC expects to carry 18 million passengers per year for the financial year, which will end March 31st. 18. And they are projected to get to 31 in the next year when some of these buses come on stream. But I want you to put that in context. In 2016, the JUTC was carrying 61 million passengers.
Management by the PNP.
So even when you get the new buses, the 50 or the 70, which are programmed for 23-24, you will only get to 31 million, which is a half of what you were doing 6 years ago. Now understand what that means. It means that when people go to a bus stop, them can't get the bus. So they have to go into the taxis. And because you have so much taxis, they are fighting for the passengers. And so when we look on where we are on the road, it is a significant part of how the government has managed public transportation. We have to do better. We have to do better. We have to do better.
Chaos.
Madam Speaker, I want to shift from public transportation to talk about the state of our economy. Jamaica at 60 years is still a young nation, but we're old enough to, and we have enough experience to understand that we have what I call a low-wage, low-tech economic model that we have been pursuing for decades, and that will only deliver what it has delivered, which is low growth and its negative social consequences. And what I mean by that, if you look at the average annual growth rate in Jamaica since independence, the average annual growth rate is just about over 1%. And I will say, and I will give credit where credit is due, we have recovered well from COVID. We have recovered well from COVID, right? The data says it. We're not arguing with that. But having recovered well, when you look at what the projection from the government is for the next 4 years, 1.6% for next year, 1.1% for 24-25, 1% for 25-26, and 1% for 26-27. So having had, not my data, data from the Ministry of Finance, and I'm not being critical, just hear me. I'm just saying that is our reality as a low-wage, low-tech, low-growth country. And it has spanned administrations. It has spanned administration. So I'm not seeking to make a political point here. I'm seeking to say it has been a characteristic of this economy that we are in. And Madam Speaker, we have to make a decision to make a transition from this low-wage, low-tech, low-growth model. Because the consequence of low-wage, low-tech, low-growth is the widening gulf between those who have and those who don't. It is the deterioration in the social conditions which contribute to the level of crime that we have. And Madam Speaker, when people say we can't continue so, that's what they mean. That's exactly what they mean. What they mean is, in spite of the macroeconomic performance, in spite of an overperformance of revenues by maybe $80 to $90 billion, in spite of record low unemployment rates, every one of us inside here know that there are so many people who just can't make ends meet. They can't. They don't feel it. They don't feel this performance and those gains. So, Madam Speaker, we have to change course. Our economy must be transformed from its overwhelming dependence on a low-wage, low-value-added formal sector that exports either raw material, such as bauxite, or on the services side, we have BPO and tourism. And move to a situation where the estimated 500,000 people in our informal sector are brought more into the formal sector. And Madam Speaker, let me be clear. The model we have can reduce unemployment, as it is now at record low levels. But it very rarely raises the standard of living for the majority at the bottom. So even with the record low 6% unemployment rate and seemingly being close to full employment, we have so many Jamaicans who are struggling, who are fighting, and can't survive. So, Madam Speaker, we have to make a transition from low-wage, low-tech, where we can raise the standard of living, where we can have more value add in what we do, and where we can strengthen the tax base so that we can deliver the social services that the country needs. Madam Speaker, our reality is that as a small island economy with a tiny domestic market, low labor productivity, a weak educational system, a weak tradition of firms investing in product development and innovative research, and with weak linkages to the global value chain. That's a characteristic of Jamaica. But the reality that we have today, in Jamaica today, does not have to be our destiny. The task for us, for all of us, the task for all of us as a nation must be to set out on a new path, to begin a journey of transition in our economy through improved productivity, which will create better paying jobs and lift the standard of living for all our people. That means we must adopt a comprehensive set of policies which will strive to tap into our natural creativity and to help us lift ourselves to higher technical levels globally. That is the only way that we can generate higher income sustainably, to strengthen the tax base, to finance the health, the education, the housing, and all the other benefits that people need. Only way. And Madam Speaker, it's the only way we can reduce poverty and crime in a sustainable way. So, Madam Speaker, I want to outline what I believe are some things that we can start to do. And some of them are being done. So I'm not going to say that everything is new. But what I would say is that there needs to be more emphasis and a deliberate focus on these things to help us to move and have that transition. Intentional. So if we're to move from a low-wage economy to a higher wage, a technically more sophisticated, a higher value-added, and a people-centered economy, we need to focus on industries that can help us to achieve those objectives. And I want to start first, Madam Speaker, by looking at our agricultural industry. Agriculture must be a critical part of our investment. Must be a critical part of our investment because apart from addressing income and financial support for the most vulnerable, the cost of food is seen as a companion to food security for everybody in Jamaica. Food security means that we can realize more of the food that we eat from our own farms, which also means we can better protect ourselves from commodity price movements. And we import so many things here. It means that a greater deal more should be done for agriculture than is currently being done in the budget. And I want to... Madam Speaker, there are three areas that I want to highlight under agriculture. The first is irrigation, the second is research and development, and the third is providing access to financing. Irrigation is an essential component of agriculture today because of the variability of rainfall due to climate change. No longer can farmers depend on historical rain patterns to determine when to plant their crops. We are used to, in Jamaica, some crops being seasonal. Some are, but we also know many farmers make a determination about when they anticipate rainfall to decide what they plant. But, Madam Speaker, with the advent of climate change, as we are experiencing now, with one of the more severe droughts we have had in more recent history, we can see that we cannot depend on natural rainfall as a basis for building our agricultural industry. So we recognize and acknowledge that there are irrigation projects taking place. We know there's Essex Valley. We know there are projects in St. Catherine and Clarendon. But these projects are an expansion of the existing NIC Irrigation Commission programs. What? Yeah, man. In terms of irrigation, Madam Speaker, not only does the NIC network in farming areas need to be expanded, but we also need to ensure that the lands which are in irrigatable areas are being adequately utilized. I want to look at agricultural research and development. Research and development under the Ministry of Agriculture has been allocated 823 million, which represents 0.09% of the budget. And this is also 0.03% of GDP. The Scientific Research Council, which has agricultural research and development aimed at improving productivity, seed availability, and crop yield as one of its remits, gets 714 million, or 0.07% of the budget. The Agricultural Investment Corporation, which has a mission to facilitate agricultural development for economic advancement and the well-being of the Jamaican people, gets 571 million. So, Madam Speaker, all these numbers indicate that our spending on R&D in agriculture is simply too low. And for the sector to achieve its full potential, we need to invest much more. Much more. In terms of R&D, we need to research to produce more productive seedlings, which are resistant to disease and the climate variability farmers are experiencing today. You know, the most hurtful thing is when a farmer, without necessarily the technical knowledge, spends his time, resources, planting something, probably without the guidance, only to find out that there is some disease, something which wipes out his crop. And when you wipe out his crop, you wipe out his livelihood. And I don't come to the 2-foot push them yet. But without the R&D, we're doing a disservice to our farmers, because the R&D can guide them as to what to plant, when to plant, to ensure that they can maximize their yields. Madam Speaker, we also have other institutions. We have the Scientific Research Council. We have borders. These, we need to leverage the work being done by these institutions. We need to provide more resources so that they can increase the output, the technical training, and the support that they provide to the agricultural industry.
They were cutting edge.
They were cutting edge, right? These are the institutions that require the funding so that we can make research and development a cornerstone in the agricultural industry. Madam Speaker, another major issue facing farmers is the very difficult task of accessing financing, right? For many of them, it's just very difficult. It's difficult because, first, banks are reluctant to lend for farming because the risks are high. One crop can be wiped out by a disease, by a flood, by a hurricane, or a 2-foot post, right? And as such, banks are reluctant to lend. And even when monies are provided through our development bank, farmers still struggle to find the collateral to take up the loans. Because for many of them, the farm that they are on, they don't necessarily have any title to it, and they are required to find either a house, car, or something else to pledge as a collateral. So it means that many of them can't even take up the loans that are provided through our development bank and other institutions. Agriculture, Madam Speaker, is an important sector of the economy. To drive food security as well as employment beyond low-wage employment. Most agriculture is small farming, with 41.5% of farmers farming on lands that are 0.5 hectare and smaller. 0.5 hectares, 1 acre?
Roughly.
Just 1 acre. And 1%, 1.15% farm on 20 hectares and above. So the farms are not just economic institutions. They also represent homes. They also contribute to the national well-being. We know how proud people feel when their work helps to build a nation. We know how proud they feel when there's a sense of ownership. So land access through farming is like home ownership. It creates social respect and a sense of well-being among our people. We must be promoting this through our budget. And we're doing, let me be clear, I'm not saying we're not doing any of these things. I am saying, no, and I see you, Floyd, but I'm saying the emphasis that needs to be placed and the funding on these things needs to be improved if we are to transition the economy from where we are to where we need to be. Madam Speaker, I want to now move to the area of logistics. And as, yes. Mr. Logistics, sir. You said, Your Excellency? Okay. Madam Speaker, as we chart our path from a low-wage economy to a more high-tech, high-earning economy, Jamaica has tremendous untapped opportunities in our logistics sector. Jamaica has gained significant foreign and local investment in the logistics sector, but has the potential to earn much, much more. There are some significant advantages that we have as a country. We're a strategic geographic location. We're close to the main east-west shipping lanes that connect the Far East, Europe, and North America. We have a solid, well-developed transport and telecoms infrastructure, and we have a large and trainable workforce. Madam Speaker, we need to use these advantages to pursue real and lucrative opportunities within the logistics sector, and there are many. There is bunkering, which provides the fueling of ships, and we have approximately 4,000 ships that call on Jamaica on an annual basis, 4,000, and that number will grow. There's an opportunity to hire engineers, technicians, marine pilots. We can look at warehousing and distribution through the Special Economic Incentive Program. If we can attract more investments in these areas, this can lead to opportunities for the hiring of warehouse clerks, distribution analysts, accounting clerks, to name a few. There are also significant opportunities in ship maintenance and repair. We just saw the opening just recently of one near Rockfort in Phillips constituency. And that provides an opportunity to hire high-end welders, maintenance engineers, and logistics analysts. So a thriving logistics sector, Madam Speaker, will require a significant number of highly skilled workers doing technologically advanced tasks. We're going to need big data analysts, logistic data scientists, marine pilots, marine insurance managers, and many, many more. And I mention that because we're talking about how we can transition from the low-tech, low-skill type economy to a more higher value-added type of economy. Attracting more investment in this sector requires an activist approach from the government in preparing both the people and the environment for this sector to grow. So we are doing things, and there are investments, but I'm saying the opportunity and the potential is there to do a lot more and to move our people up the value chain and to be intentional in our approach. Madam Speaker, one of the impediments to moving Jamaica to a higher wage, higher value-added economy is the exorbitant cost of electricity. The exorbitant cost of electricity. We cannot be a productive economy with the prevailing electricity rates. Governments over the years, and I believe the member from East Kingston would have been the minister at the time, have endorsed a policy where we moved from achieving 30% of renewables by 2030 to 50% of renewables by 2030. When we left office, the current government endorsed the same target. But Madam Speaker, I must tell you, I am profoundly disappointed that 7 years after this government has come in, 4 ministers of energy, we have not issued a single request for proposal for renewable energy to go onto the national grid. Yes. The last one was in 2013, and that build-out took place in 2016, 2017. But in 7 years, not a single request for proposal for renewable energy. Not a single one.
For nothing at all.
And Madam Speaker, last year I raised it. There were promises it coming soon. I hear again it coming soon. Every time the issue comes up, we hear it is coming soon. Time comes. Madam Speaker, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something.
I was here for years. I could make up for the accent, so.
Madam Speaker, let me tell you something about this. And I feel passionately about this one because I worked in that ministry with a member from East Kingston and Port Royal. A country pays a price for corruption and mismanagement. I'm going to tell you what it is. There have been 4 different ministers in that ministry. 4 different ministers. Right? And the disruption that has been occasioned in that ministry has made that ministry a shell of what it was before. I'm just going to call it straight. A shell of what it was before. It was one of the most catalytic ministries to drive economic growth. And we're now in a position 7 years later where you can issue one RFP for renewable energy in a country where we have sunshine 95% of the time. No, Madam Speaker, something is wrong with it. Something is wrong with it. Now, why is this important? First, renewables are a lower cost alternative to heavy fuel oil. And we have seen with the Russian-Ukraine war that you are at the mercy of the international oil market and the fluctuations in oil prices. Secondly, it helps us to reduce our carbon footprint and to help us to attain our goal of the 50%. And third, and one of the most important ones, it has the potential to catalyze an industry that will, for example, assemble renewable energy components. It has the potential to do that. Madam Speaker, what we're seeing in the energy sector is that the larger players are coming off the grid. The larger players are. They are getting financing. Many companies offered the financing. They are coming off the grid. But it has a consequence. Because when the larger players come off the grid, it will only leave the small, private players, like households, who remain on the grid. Who will then, residential ones, who will now have to bear the burden of that entire infrastructure to fund. Right? Madam Speaker, we have to, this delay in the RFP has meant that there are millions of US dollars in investment that have not been made in Jamaica. Philip can tell you, Tony can tell you, I can tell you the amount of people who still ask us, who have an interest, who want to invest here, but they can't go on the grid until the government comes to the table with something. After 7 years, Madam Speaker, it is a shame that we don't have any significant movement on this issue. And there are other issues in the sector, but I know the member from East Kingston will deal with them in his sectoral presentation. Madam Speaker, I want to now move to what I call the blue economy. And as we talk about renewables and the potential to transform our economy, we have identified other ways of protecting and preserving our natural environment while deriving financial benefits for the country. The Blue Bond for Ocean Conservation Strategy is an innovative approach to work with governments on refinancing a portion of their debt, securing long-term sustainable financing for large-scale protection and management of our valuable natural resources that lives and livelihoods depend on. The Blue Bond project is a deal. A country commits to protecting about 30% of its ocean territory, which would include coral reefs, mangroves, fishing sites, and other ocean habitats and species as determined from the completion of a study that would be done. In support of this, the group, which is called TNC, the Nature's Conservancy, works with the government and allows the government to repurchase debt, often at a discount, and refinance it with more favorable interest terms and repayment terms. The resulting savings are then used to support new, planned, and ongoing conservation work. Madam Speaker, we don't have to look too far. Barbados is currently doing this. They are partnered with private financial institutions, plus the IDB, and they have raised approximately 150 million US through a dual currency loan facility. The loan, which was partially funded by the issuance of bonds in the capital market, funded the buyback of a portion of the debt. So in essence, a bond is issued which allows you to pay down more expensive debt, and you refinance it through this methodology at a cheaper rate. This has been done in Barbados. I understand Belize, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is moving that way, and other countries are also doing so. Madam Speaker, I believe it is an opportunity that we can take advantage of as a country, because the savings that we accomplish the goal of protecting our environment, and we also derive a benefit from reducing our debt servicing costs, and those funds will go to the Environmental Protection Program. Madam Speaker, I now want to turn my attention to the cultural and creative industries. If we are serious about transformation and moving away from this low-wage economy and preparing our people to use their skills and talents to pursue globally competitive opportunities, then the cultural and creative industries must be an area for focus. Must be an area for focus. And Madam Speaker, I will say I acknowledge the 1 billion fund that has been provided to the film industry. It's a good start. And the film industry, I know, recognizes and appreciates that. But as Babsin will tell you, the cultural and creative industries has about 20 subsectors and has over 40 industry segments with activities, linkages, and products. And so there's an opportunity, as we have focused on film, that we ensure we provide resources to some of the other areas as well. Because the same creativity, the same skills, the same talent exists. And we know that we won't have the resources to do it in every subsector. No, we have started with film, but we also have to target some of the other areas. Just last month, February 25th, there were 4 major events in Kingston at the same time. You went to all 4 on the same day? On the same day. Huh? You were there at all 4 to Chris? Madam Speaker, these events were well patronized, well produced, and really showcased the viability of arts, culture, creativity as an industry. There were hundreds, probably thousands of people who were involved in the planning, the execution, from the artists and musicians to the people who provide the stage, sound, light, the bartenders, the food people, and I could go on. But Madam Speaker, I would ask, and I would look at the minister, can we calculate what the value of those events are to the Jamaican economy? We can. And in calculating it, we need to ensure that the money goes back into those areas. Because one of the difficulties with the categories provided by Statin is that many of those subsectors are not necessarily captured. So it might be captured under tourism because there are people in the hotels, right? But it wouldn't necessarily be captured as a result of those events which allow the people to come in. So we have to ensure that there is proper recording of the contribution of this sector, because the recording helps us to plan for the sector. And we believe that by starting with having the categories that allow us to determine the value of the sector, we can appropriately contribute. But if, you're putting that in place. And even as we talk about the planning, even with the 4 events that took place, every time there's a major event in Kingston, and I represent a constituency where some of those locations are in, that we have residents who complain about them. And it really highlights the need, and our colleague on this side has been a passionate advocate of it, of ensuring that we have the entertainment zones. Right? When I think of the big ones in Kingston, you have Hope Gardens, but it sits right there between 2 communities. When you have the National Stadium, you have Port Royal, you have Sabina Park. But while there is so much benefit from these events, it has a disruptive impact on the people who live around. I know. Well, I hear you, Babsy, but they weren't necessarily, but let's take, for example, Hope Gardens. Hope Gardens has been there for years, but the use of Hope Gardens as an entertainment location is a relatively new phenomenon. So for people who would have lived in Amona Heights and Hope Pastures for 40 odd years, they're not used to that. Similarly, I'll tell you, in my constituency, the mass camp has moved to the stadium. So the people who live in Stadium Gardens, Nannyville, and even up on the hills are not used to that kind of sound on every Friday and Saturday night. Right? So we have to look at the zoning and we have to look at the issues. And I would put on the table, Madam Speaker, I know you're moving to develop a sports museum, but we also need a music museum. And I'm not talking about government money, because I believe there's enough private interest that you would have a public-private initiative to build a music museum. A music museum that people will come to Jamaica to see, and people will come to Jamaica to watch.
Good quality.
Madam Speaker, as we move to transform our economy, I want to look at what we need to do in our education sector. Moving from our low-wage, low-productivity economy is a direct result. Our low-wage, low-productivity economy is a direct result of low and poor educational outcomes. So to achieve better outcomes, we have to transform our education system. Orlando Patterson issued a report on the transformation of education, which was, the reading was pretty damning. For those people who are familiar with reports, would know the Davies report from the 90s would have had similar conclusions and similar recommendations. And while COVID delivered a major blow to our education system, and there were initiatives by the government to address it, we believe that there's a lot more that needs to be done to ensure that we recover from that learning loss. The Education Transformation Program, which is budgeted to cost $159 million for this year, is projected to spend over $4.2 billion over the next 3 years. And the centerpiece is the construction of 6 new STEAM and 1 visual and performing arts secondary level education by 2028-29 to increase student access to quality educational school places. And by STEAM, we're talking about science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. But, Madam Speaker, we don't support that approach. No. We don't support the approach of just building specific STEAM schools. We believe that all secondary schools should be equipped to provide a robust STEAM program with different schools offering different skills depending on teacher resources and the expectation that over time that we can attract new skills. You, Minister, you're offering STEAM scholarships to teachers, STEM, to teachers. That's a good start. But we have to ensure that STEM is infused at the lower levels within our school. So we shouldn't just build 6 schools. Let us bring it into the schools with the trained teachers so that mainstream it, so that all students can benefit from the STEM-based education. And not just a few. Because in reality, if you only build the 6 schools, it's only the people who have the opportunity to go to those 6 schools who will get the STEM education. Right? It fosters that inequity in the system. So we have to make it mainstream in our educational system.
Elitist approach to education, which is not going to help.
Madam Speaker, the new standards curriculum provides an effective basis for preparing students with skills which will enable them to embark on a path of innovation at the secondary level and build on those innovative experiences at the post-secondary and tertiary levels. The key skills with which students at the primary and secondary education levels will be equipped with are problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, curiosity, logical mathematical skills, and engineering design skills. And engineering design skills really are also an offshoot of really problem solving skills. If students are to benefit from the promise and the purpose of the new standards curriculum, then adequate funding for teaching must be provided at the primary level to embed STEM in the teaching and learning activities. Madam Speaker, what exists right now is really woefully inadequate. Woefully inadequate. And if we are to ensure that the findings from both the Patterson report and the Davies report, if we are to reverse those findings, we have to find the resources to put it in at the primary level. Madam Speaker, we also have to increase access to tertiary education. Our tertiary participation is about 27%. This is low in comparison to Barbados and Trinidad, who are at about 65%. Globally, countries with the highest levels of GDP and per capita income have tertiary participation at 70s to 90%. But, Madam Speaker, one of the main reasons why more students cannot and do not take advantage of tertiary studies is that they simply can't access the funding to do so. And I would tell you, one of the biggest impediments for them is the need for a guarantor at the student loan level. So I want to call on the government. The opposition leader said it last year, and I want to repeat it. You have lifted the guarantee requirement for those students on path. We need to lift it for everybody. We need to lift it for all students. And I'll tell you why it's important. The students who can't get a guarantor are generally the students from the most difficult backgrounds. They can't find somebody in the family, they can't find a friend, they don't have anybody who can stand as a guarantor. So we are reinforcing that system of that inequity. Because people who are a little more affluent have people who they can find as guarantors. But we need the persons who come from lower income households to get the access so that they can lift themselves. And so I'm saying, let us, you started with the part things, let us expand it. Let us even look at a pilot to see how it works, to determine what are the issues that you may need to adjust. But I'm telling you, one of the biggest hindrances is that need for a guarantor to access money from the student loan bureau. Madam Speaker, we also have to invest more at the early childhood development stage. Right? Support for this sector, and let me tell you, it is the most important sector. All the studies show it. But support for the sector requires that providers be sensitized and trained, and that focus be on providing resources to improve for play and interaction. Early childhood development should be primarily about enabling children from 2 to 6 to build friendships, to learn to solve conflicts, to develop respect for authority, to learn to respect themselves and others, and to develop a spirit of community. Now, Madam Speaker, the first 6 years of a child's life and exposure to schooling should not be about swatting to learn to pass a particular exam, which is what we are at right now. Right? And enabling children from an early age to learn to live in a community is a vital part of overcoming the high levels of aggression and violence that we are now seeing among school-age children. So overcoming this problem is not going to be easy. It's not an easy feat, but we must tackle the disease at the root cause.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
Madam Speaker, I want to shift the conversation to speak briefly about a matter that has been in the public domain. Democratic politics says that a government must be transparent and honest in conducting the affairs of the people, even when the truth reveals embarrassing details or failures. The opposition, Madam Speaker, continues to call for full transparency in the handling of the theft and the fraud allegations at Stocks and Securities Limited. Now, Madam Speaker, there are two issues here. There is a criminal investigation which is being led by local law enforcement with support from overseas. And let me be clear, we want nothing to impede that or interfere with that, and we are as repulsed and we are as angry about what took place, and we want those perpetrators to be brought to justice. The only thing we ask for is that law enforcement provides a regular update on the status of the investigation so that people who may have lost money know where the investigation is. But, Madam Speaker, the other side to this SSL issue is the role of the regulatory agency, the Financial Services Commission. And we do not accept that full transparency with regard to the role of the FSC will compromise the criminal investigation. We don't. So, Madam Speaker, I'm going to repeat things I've called for outside of this House. That there should be a release of all the FSC reports that were done on SSL, plus the board minutes and the reports that were done by management to the board on SSL. We are calling for the Auditor General to do an audit of the FSC to determine the appropriateness of the handling of the SSL issue. And why am I asking this? The minister has been at pains to say it has happened over 13 years, right? and there are clearly issues about how the FSC operated. We agree on that. But I will also tell you, if you look at how the FSC has operated over the last year or two, they have taken very strong enforcement action against other players in the industry. And they have, in fact, revoked licenses. And they have, in fact, done things that have held companies to account. So it is important to understand why they took the action they did or why they didn't. And also for the Auditor General to determine whether they had the resources, the technical resources and the financial resources to carry out their tasks. And the third issue, Minister, that I believe is important. In looking at the issue of the SSL, there were government agencies who had securities with the SSL. I'm not raising issues with them because I know what the nature of those securities are, and we know that they are safe. But I believe it's important for the ministry to determine for all the agencies and departments, particularly the public bodies, that they are following the ministry's guidelines with respect to investments in financial institutions. Right? And I don't know whether you have done that already to satisfy yourself, but I am calling on you to do so, that whatever those investments are, whether they are government securities, which would be more secure, or whether there are investments directly in these financial institutions, we need to know that taxpayers' monies are safe and secure, and that the guidelines that have been outlined by the Ministry of Finance are being followed. And we have seen it before. We saw it with the Airports Authority issue and the first one. Madam Speaker, in closing. Closing. Madam Speaker, the $1 trillion budget tabled by the government does not adequately address the major issues that are affecting the country. Some of the issues outlined are a step in the right direction, and I've acknowledged that. Many of them. But it does not tackle the major suffering and hardships that are being felt by the majority of the Jamaican people. It does not. A feature of the Jamaican economy for most of our lifetime has been a low wage, a low tech, and a low productivity economy. The only way to raise the standard of living, to reduce poverty, and to reduce crime is to transform our economy structurally to a higher value added, higher income, and a higher tech economy. This transformation requires investing in a number of critical sectors, from agriculture to education to renewable energies to logistics or cultural and creative industries, and also to look at new and innovative ways to finance things like our environment. Madam Speaker, as a political party, we recognize that transformation of our economy is our ticket out of this low-wage, low-productivity model that has held Jamaica back for so long. And we are committed, when we are here now, we expect to be over there in the future. But we are committed. We are committed to beginning that process of transformation so that Jamaica can achieve its full potential and become the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and to do business. Thank you, members. Thank you, Madam.
That's a very surgical presentation. Huh? That is free of fluff.
Members, after the opposition spokesperson started his presentation, Mr. Horace Clue, former Member of Parliament, entered this Parliament, and I want to acknowledge his presence this afternoon. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. He's my friend too. Madam Speaker, I want to congratulate the member on his presentation and to say that he raised some good points. And I now ask that the debate be suspended until next week when we resume, and we will have presentations on Tuesday by the Leader of the Opposition and on Thursday by the Honorable Prime Minister. So, Madam, so
the
you have to
question
suspend.
first of all is
Right.
that the question before us as members is that the debate be suspended until next week, Tuesday, when the Leader of Opposition will make his contribution to the debate. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now ask for the recommittal of the item notices of motion given orally.
Members, the question before the House is that there is a recommittal of the items on the agenda, notices of motions given orally. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House of Representatives, I will move the following motion. Whereas subsection 1, GI of section 41 of the Constitution of Jamaica requires a member of this Honorable House of Representatives.
Just a moment, House Leader. The House has not been adjourned, and the House Leader is on our feet.
Whereas subsection 1, GI of section 41 of the Constitution of Jamaica requires a member of this Honorable House of Representatives to vacate his seat if any firm in which he is a partner or any company of which he is a director or manager becomes a party to any contract with the government of Jamaica for or on account of the public service, or if he becomes a partner in a firm or a director or manager of a company which is a party to any such contract. And whereas the Member of Parliament for St. Catherine South Eastern has been employed as a business development officer with Shoreline Foundation, Inc., and may from time to time enter into contracts with the government of Jamaica and its agencies. And whereas the member has disclosed his interest in this firm, be it resolved that this motion be referred to the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Madam Speaker? Yeah, but I can proceed, right? Yes. On the public business, Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question before the House is that the standing orders is suspended to allow the House Leader to take the motion, notice of which she gave earlier. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now move that the motion, notice of which I gave earlier, be approved.
Members, the question is that the motion, notice of which the House Leader gave earlier, be now approved. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. The motion is approved.
Madam Speaker, it is not contemplated for us to do any further business today. I therefore ask that the House adjourns until Tuesday, March 14, 2023 at 2 p.m. sharp.
Members, the question is that the House now be adjourned until next week, Tuesday, March the 13th, 2023 at 2 p.m. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. This House is now adjourned.